welcome. Take It Up with Jessica Lee. I'm here with Russell Mohr, who's the Director of Sales Engineering at MobileIron. Hi, Russell.
Hi, good to see you again.
Yes, well, great to have you on the show to talk about mobile security because I know that security is a hot space and people continue to invest in that. And 5G is coming, so it'd be great to hear your thoughts on what's happening in the 5G rollout and some of the security concerns and how you can help enterprises.
Sure. So, great question. Great way to start. So, I think it's a very exciting time for 5G right now. So, we're seeing rollouts across the U.S. and NFL cities, and starting to get into to the second and third tier cities as well. And one of the beautiful things about 5G, how it impacts consumers particularly, is it's a lot faster.
Wait,
So,
when you say NFL city, what does that mean?
oh, I mean, like, generally like the really big American cities that have,
Okay,
like, are big enough to have an NFL team, like,
got it. Okay,
Dallas, Baltimore, New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, cities like that.
okay.
So look, the speeds are a lot faster. Theoretically, we can get up to 10 or even 20 gigabits download per second. It's going to enable a whole swarm of new types of applications. So we're going to be able to have very low latency with 5G that allows us to do things like have autonomously guided vehicles, AVGs, like think a forklift in a factory, or think a self-driving car, or think drones, like lots of equipment that needs to make split-second decisions about when to stop or when to turn. And we're also going to have a high density of 5G. So think smart cities, smart grids, the electric
IoT
utilities,
devices, right?
IoT devices, and a lot of them.
Right.
So really promising technology. I think it's going to really spur an evolution in a lot of applications. But at the same time, there are some things we need to be wary of.
Yes, I think that with the new phones, like the hardware that you need to actually do the 5G data transfer, now the consumer is both using the phone for business and for personal
Yes.
information. And I wonder what challenges that we would face then, because I'm not an engineer and I'm not a security expert, but certainly I use my phone for both work and personal reasons. So I'm exposed, right?
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of the challenges with 5G and how we can manage them, like from a BYOD and even a corporate owned perspective. So first of all, there's been some researchers that have discovered vulnerabilities in 5G. So at Black Hat last year, they announced like about a dozen of them, and then we had about another dozen more. 5G isn't pure 5G yet, so it relies on 4G. So any vulnerability that we see in 4G might be found in 5G too. And the first thing a hacker might do is try and bump you down to 4G to see if there's a vulnerability that wasn't addressed in the new 5G spec. So with the protocol itself, although it's the safest protocol yet, there are still some vulnerabilities, and I believe there always will be. The other thing is 5G networks can run off small cells. Think about the size of a shoebox.
Mm.
And so there might potentially be a lot of them. These signals don't go very far. They can't go through concrete very well. If it's raining, that might degrade the signal. So there might be a lot of these. So there's the potential for a perpetrator to hide in plain sight, just because there's so much of this equipment out there. But the number one thing that people are concerned about, I think, with 5G right now is something called untrusted supply chain. And that means you have Huawei, ZTE, manufacturers that aren't trusted, at least by the US government today.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are concerns about having official data right on these networks. And so much so that we see the Army, the Navy, DARPA, which originally created Ethernet, Department of State, they're all trying to figure out ways to, like, how can we not use a 5G network that we know has an untrusted supply chain partner or a manufacturer like Huawei or ZTE in it. So we've seen a lot of activity in the government side on that. And that's also something that we've been focusing on. We have some capabilities at MobileIron that help us manage risk when we're connected to a network that we might not know that much about.
Yeah, yeah. And so if you're on a business trip and you happen to be outside of the US and you need connectivity, what can you do to make sure that you minimize the exposure to maybe untrusted parties?
So first and foremost, so MobileIron we're a security platform for mobile and desktop. We do something called UEM, or Universal Endpoint Management.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I landed somewhere in a new country and I wanted to make sure that my data wasn't being intercepted. One thing that I might do is launch a VPN. So we have very easy, simple to use VPNs that the end user doesn't even need to initiate. We could say, if we notice that you're connected to a network that we don't trust, say China Unicom, why don't we launch a VPN that's going to encrypt all of your traffic? Or why don't we push down a configuration that's going to connect you to a secure Wi-Fi network at your facility? And some other things we can do is just warn the user, hey, are you sure, we know you're connected to this network. Are you sure you trust this network? And then lastly, we can actually take an action on the device. Like, we could block you from getting into Office 365 or other cloud services, or getting to data behind the firewall. And then the biggest stick in our tool belt is we can actually remove data from the device. So remove your enterprise data, but leave, like you said, BYOD, I'm a consumer. We'll leave your personal photos and music collection alone, but we'll remove all the sensitive work content from your device. And then when we notice that you've come back into a trusted state, this is called zero trust, right? We only trust you when we can verify that your device can be trusted. Then we can redeploy all of the configurations that you had before. The end user doesn't need to know much about this. They might notice, hey, I can't get into my mail anymore. Well, that's because we don't trust you. But as soon as they disconnect from China Mobile or China Unicom or whatever network it is, then we would re-provision the data.
What about using satellites, like nano satellites, to then provide internet access? Is that something that you envision to be a reality?
So, I mean, there are definitely some real satellite solutions out there. The thing, we don't directly impact those because we're talking about satellite phones here. But the way I would think about it is, do you have a device like a router or something like that that is connected, that has Wi-Fi on one side and has a backhaul that's using satellite or something like that? And one of the things that we do about Wi-Fi networks is we can actually detect, are you connected to a rogue network? Is this a Wi-Fi network that you thought was trustworthy, but actually isn't what it purports to be? Maybe that's not the Starbucks network or the O'Hare network. Maybe it's something else. So we can detect that, and we can actually take an action on it if we don't trust the Wi-Fi network, whatever the backhaul is, right? Whether it's satellite or something else.
I see. So that it will alert you to the possible risks that you're exposed to, and then you can pick and choose which network that you trust more to connect to, as opposed to automatically by default connecting to the Starbucks.
Right. Like, well, look, we could have a policy that says you just can't connect to an untrusted Wi-Fi network, or you can't connect to a network that, has a hotspot login that we don't really trust. We could push down a whitelist of Wi-Fi networks, or we could detect that you're attaching to a network that we don't trust, and push down a remediation. And it could be any of the things I mentioned before, including launch a VPN, remove content from the device, warn the user. Lots of things that we can do in those scenarios.
What would you say to be the top security challenge now that CIOs are trying to solve, or CISOs are really trying to solve?
I see in 2020, with COVID and everything else happening in the world, we're seeing a lot more ransomware. We're seeing a lot more phishing attempts. And so I think that the most vulnerable thing in an enterprise environment today is the username and password. So if I'm the CIO, I want to eliminate usernames and passwords from my environment, because that is the entry point to the network. That is the entry point to injecting malware in the network and getting access to the machines. So if you never have a credential with a password that's getting reused everywhere at all, I think that that makes the enterprise a lot safer. And our approach to this is actually, we like to use single sign-on technologies, but we leverage FIDO2 is a standard that you hear talked about a lot that is upcoming in our platform. But today we use biometrics like Face ID or Touch ID or Android facial recognition. And instead of having to put in a username or a password, when I open up an app like Concur or Salesforce, instead of using and having to remember that password, I can simply authenticate by looking at my device or touching my device and getting logged in that way. That way, the hackers, no matter how many phishing attempts that they're launching, they won't be able to get at those credentials.
Okay, so it's like with my phone, when I want to access my bank, I just
Yes.
need to use my thumb to open up the banking website. But on my laptop, I can use my finger to turn on the laptop. But then when I want to get into certain applications, I still need to put in my user ID and password.
Yeah, the idea is absolutely. So like that behavior that you're experiencing of having to put in a username and password, that's not necessary. And that's something that we've been helping our customers with for quite some time at MobileIron. The other thing is, I think you need a multi-layered approach to security. So that was zero trust approach, or also known as enterprise everywhere, right? Borders have kind of eroded. Everything isn't sitting behind a firewall anymore. So I don't know, when I'm on 5G and I have my device and I walk into my office, this device might be a lot faster than that Wi-Fi network. And the things I'm connecting to, cloud services like G Suite, I might not need to even get on the network anymore. So my behavior is going to change. So you need to have a zero trust approach. Can I trust this device? I checked in on it an hour ago, but now something's changed. It's a mobile device. It moved to a new network. Is that still trustworthy? Has there been a phishing attempt on the device? So threat defense should be a part of that. Has somebody downloaded malware? Somebody tried to compromise the device or tried to escalate privileges on the device. So all of these things can happen. So the way we look at it is you shouldn't trust the device until you are sure that you can trust the user on the device using a biometric like we talked about, that you can trust the device so it's not rooted or jailbroken, and even the application, right? It's not malware. Or if you're using Salesforce, it's not any of the thousands of apps that work with Salesforce, but only the official app that if you're using MobileIron, you have some control over. I can control how that app shares data, and I can remove that data if we no longer trust the device. So that's how we approach zero trust at MobileIron.
Right. I see what you're saying. There's like multiple layers of security there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. I want to ask about your leadership. I know you manage a team of 8 folks on your team, and you work with a lot of the public agencies, the government. I know you handle commercials too, but let's talk about the government then. They are definitely very concerned about security and looking at the international security issues, but just the agencies themselves, where us citizens are interacting, getting services with the government, what are some of the exciting implementations that they're doing on the security front?
So lots of things. Like if we're talking about, so you mentioned consumers, but let's start out with government employees. For ages, government employees would access government data by using what's called a PIV or a CAC card. This is like a physical piece of hardware that allows them to log on to certain services. But what's happened is we've seen a lot of this data now needs to be accessed from mobile endpoints, and those CAC PIV cards don't work anymore. So one of the things that we focus on is how do we bring that experience into mobile, where you have a highly secure way to get at your data using a CAC or PIV card, but by using a software token that's on a mobile device. So that's called derived credentials. The credential is derived from that card. And we support that today. From a consumer set standpoint, we've also seen like a lot of agencies deploying a lot of apps. Like if you do immigration, you have lots of apps that are like citizen facing or want to be citizen facing. Or if you're the post office, you might have a dozen or 20 apps that consumers use. So wouldn't you want to have that process, DevSecOps, wouldn't you want to have a more secure process around that? Wouldn't you want to have an automated way to publish your apps? Because, oh my goodness, you've got 50 apps that you need to publish and update every month. So we've been investing in DevSecOps. We recently acquired a company called Encaptic, and that allows us to do just that, to have some control over the automation and release process for like citizen-facing or internal apps that government is deploying.
Exciting. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that it's an evolving industry with innovations coming out, and then there's like bad behavior, and you try to like the good guy and the good guys and the bad guys keep on fighting each other. So we're looking forward to hearing more about the innovations coming out of MobileIron. Thank you so much, Russell, for sharing with us what's happening in the space that you're in.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Jessica. Thank you for having me on your show. I really enjoyed it.
There you have it. Take it up with Jessica Lee, Russell Mohr from MobileIron.